You're on a journey through the Bible to experience the epic story of God and to learn your part to play in the unfolding drama. Prepare for your role as you learn your history, your enemy, and your king. Welcome to the Bible Brief. Join us today as two secrets come to light. One secret causes devastation for an Israelite family, while another secret saves a Gentile family from death. You're listening to the Bible Brief. The blessing and the curse. Two opposite results from two opposite ways of life. To obey God's law to the nation of Israel would bring blessing in the land of Canaan, but to disobey God's law would bring cursing away from the land. This was core to the final message of Moses and core to the future of the people of Israel. But by now, Moses is dead, and Joshua has led the people into the promised land of Canaan. God is with them, and by his power they will drive out and conquer the people dwelling in the land that was long ago promised to Abraham. Blessing is the goal, yet cursing hangs over them with the final speech of Moses. He knew that they would eventually be cast out from the land, and this generation just didn't want to be the one that experienced the eventual expulsion from Canaan. Obedience would forestall the foreseen exile, if only they would obey. Well, sadly, soon after they enter the land, the disobedience starts, which shouldn't surprise us too much. Remember, this generation's parents in the wilderness were the ones who grumbled and rebelled against God despite all the amazing ways that he'd provided. Not only that, but remember the basic corruption that all humans have after the sin in the Garden of Eden. Bad parental examples, coupled with personal corruption, doesn't give this generation the best assets to draw from for obedience. The disobedience all starts with a secret embedded in the miraculous downfall of the fortified city of Jericho. After walking around the city of Jericho for 6 days, the Israelites walked around the city more times on the seventh day, blew the trumpets, and gave a hearty shout as God commanded, and the walls of Jericho came tumbling down, as one children's song puts it. After this, the Israelites conquer the resistant. The whole city is decimated, except for one particular woman's family, which we'll get to a bit later. As part of conquering the city, the Israelites were commanded by God to destroy literally everything in the city, except for the silver, gold, bronze, and iron. These valuable materials were to go into a special treasury and not kept by any of the Israelites. And for the most part, the Israelites are obedient to God. For the most part. In fact, all Israel is obedient, with the exception of a single person. Sadly, one of the Israelite men secretly disobeys God's command concerning the conquering of the city. He takes some of the loot that should have been destroyed, and he stores some of the fine metals that should have gone into the treasury. As a result, the anger of the Lord burned against the people of Israel. Anger demonstrated as the people attempt to conquer the next city in Canaan, the city of Ai. Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is east of Bethel, and told them, "Go up and spy out the land." So the men went up and spied out Ai. On returning to Joshua, they reported, "There's no need to send all the people. 2,000 or 3,000 men are enough to go up and attack Ai. Since the people of Ai are so few, you need not wear out all our people there." So, about 3,000 men went up to the city, but they fled before the men of Ai. And the men of Ai struck down about 36 of them, chasing them from the gate as far as the quarries and striking them down on the slopes. So the hearts of the people of Israel melted and became like water. Now, we'd think that 3,000 people could beat a measly little town of 200 or 300. But when God is angry with his people, those 3,000 Israelites might as well have gone up against 100,000. God would not allow them victory in the midst of disobedience. Joshua, for his part, is distraught at these events because he can't understand why Israel is losing. He even appeals to God's reputation and says that God's reputation is on the line when Israel loses battles like this one at Ai. But God responds to Joshua's prayer like this. He says, "Stand up. Why have you fallen on your face? Israel has sinned, and they have transgressed my covenant that I commanded them, and they have taken some of what was devoted to destruction. Indeed, they have stolen and lied, and they have put these things with their own possessions. This is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They will turn their backs and run from their enemies, because they themselves have been set apart for destruction. I will no longer be with you, unless you remove from among you whatever is devoted to destruction. Joshua now has the real reason for their defeat at Ai, and now he'll seek to rectify it. The next day, Israel does something that God commands to find the secret disobedient man. They do something like a series of ancient coin flips, called taking lots, to narrow down, seemingly by chance, who it is that sinned against the Lord. Though it seems to be chance, God is guiding the results. Here you can imagine the disobedient man beginning to sweat as his tribe is selected from among the 12, then his clan within the tribe, then his household, and finally he heard his name called. He's been found out, and immediately upon being discovered, he admits to the disobedience. He says, "It is true, I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I did. When I saw among the spoils a beautiful cloak from Shinar, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent, with the silver underneath." And Joshua responds to the man, "Why have you brought trouble upon us? Today the Lord will bring trouble upon you." And all Israel stoned him to death. Then they stoned the others and burned their bodies. And they heaped over the man a large pile of rocks that remains to this day. So the Lord turned from his burning anger. Don't miss the deathly results of this man's sin. Not only did 36 Israelites die at the city of Ai, but he and his whole family died as well. The secret sin brought destruction on not only the man, but on everything and everyone he held dear. Not him, nor his property, nor his sons and daughters survived the consequences of his sin. As God's law instructed the Israelites on many occasions, they obeyed. The law said, "Purge the evil from your midst." And Israel purged the disobedience by stoning and burning. A severe scene illustrating both the layered effects of sin and the severity of sin's penalty. This sad display of disobedience wasn't the only secret back at Jericho, though. Because there at the first city, there was another more righteous secret. A woman's secret that spelled salvation for her family among the destruction of the city. And as we'll see, just as sin's effects spill over, so also the effects of righteousness spill over as well. This righteous secret found its beginning weeks earlier, just before the Israelites conquered Canaan. At that time, Joshua had sent a couple of spies into the city to see what it was like and if it had particular vulnerabilities. And while the spies were in the city, they decided to lodge at a prostitute's house, a woman whose name was Rahab. Soon, however, the king of Jericho, having found out that Israel had sent spies into the city, calls upon Rahab and asks where the two men are. Oddly enough, Rahab, rather than giving up the two men, hides them in secret and lies to the king, saying that they had already left her home. In reality, Rahab had hidden them on her roof. After she sent the king's men away, we hear her explain herself to the two Israelite spies. She says, "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that the fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who dwell in the land are melting in fear before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the kings of the Amorites across the Jordan, whom you devoted to destruction. When we heard this, our hearts melted, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in the heavens above and on the earth below. Now therefore, please swear to me by the Lord that you will indeed show kindness to my family, because I showed kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will deliver us from death." "Our lives for your lives," the men agreed. "If you do not report our mission, we will show you kindness and faithfulness when the Lord gives us the land." Rahab, the non-Israelite Gentile prostitute, apparently believes in God. She recognizes that no one can stand before Israel because God is with them, even appealing to Israel's prior victories in battle that Jericho's people had heard of. And so she decides to secretly harbor these two men and allow them to escape safely from the city without her king's knowledge. Loyalty to the true God was more important than loyalty to her king. As a result, days later when the Israelites conquer Jericho, Rahab the prostitute and her family are saved from destruction and allowed to live. One family lives from among the whole city because of a faithful secret. These two secret keepers, the man who secretly took the devoted things from Jericho and the woman who secretly hid the two spies, have a lot to teach us. We can take away at least 4 points. First, God requires 100% obedience. One little act of rebellion caused Israel to be defeated before their enemies, and for the family of the rebellious one to die with him. For the most part, obedience is like being, for the most part, pregnant. You either are or you aren't. There isn't an in-between. Partial obedience is like testing God's holiness. It's trying to bend the commands from God. It's like echoing the serpent in the garden with the words, "Did God really say?" Second, God honors the faith of the humble. Rahab the prostitute wasn't the poster child for living a moral life. Yet perhaps it was her knowledge of her own immorality that opened the door to humble acceptance of God. When she heard of God's power to save the Israelites, somehow she knew that He really was the God of heaven and earth. And this humble and fearful faith in the true God caused her to save the two spies from the king of Jericho. A secret righteous act that surely put her at risk among the other people of Jericho. Third, effects spill over. Sins and righteous acts are never in isolation. Sin has effects beyond the sinner, which we saw not only in the defeat at Ai, but also in the destruction of not only the disobedient man, but his family as well. Similarly, though, righteous acts spill over, and we saw this with Rahab's family being saved along with her from the destruction at Jericho. Our actions affect those close to us, for good or bad. Finally, we need to observe an important fact for the ongoing Bible story. Ever since Abraham, over 400 years before this event, we've been discussing a particular nation that God is using for His purposes. We've been looking at the nation of Israel, who has inherited promises made to Abraham and who has received the law at Mount Sinai. However, here with Rahab, we see just a hint, just a glimmer of God's plan. We see a Gentile, non-Israelite woman prostitute demonstrate a courageous faith in God, who's then spared and assimilated into the nation of Israel. Here we see that God's plan is not just about Israel and all the men that we've talked about up to this point, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and so on. No, God's plan is about using the descendants of Abraham, and especially a particular descendant, to bless all the nations of the world. Blessing even to a woman prostitute from another nation. God's plan is a big plan. And right now as we go through the story, though we're focused on Israel, don't miss this fact. God's plan is about the whole world. Join us next time as the nation era draws to a close. The initial phase of conquering the land is complete. Joshua dies, and soon the nation enters a seemingly endless cycle of rebellion against God. A cycle only broken by God's grace.
For Bible readings, reflection questions, and quizzes, don't miss the Bible Brief app. Available on iOS and Android, so you can go deeper into the story. The Bible Brief is a project of the Bible Literacy Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping you learn the Bible. Give to support the Bible Brief by visiting BibleBrief.org or tap the Give link in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the Bible Literacy Foundation.